We're talking about programmatic advertising terminology, and in this lesson, we look at first, second, and third party data. These are common terms that you will hear across the programmatic advertising industry, and you must know what they are. Let's start with first party data. So, what is first party data? It is basically data that a brand owns. So, what does that mean? Let's look at some examples. Customer databases are an example of first party data. So your customer email IDs, mobile numbers that you've collected over time. This is data that you own. You know how you've collected them. You know where it came from. Another example is data from your CRM software. This could be your customer purchase data, which customers have higher transaction volumes, how frequently do they make a purchase. All of this is again data that you own and it's first party data. Data of your app users is another example. People who use your app, people who use your app less frequently, people who use it more frequently, people who make purchases in the app. Another example is people who visited your website and you're able to track those visitors and remarket to them later. You can even use this data to build audiences similar to your existing customers. Another example of first party data is people who watched your video. Let's say all the people who watched your video on YouTube, you own the data and you could target them with another video. All the people who watched a certain video on Facebook, you could target them with another video. So you own all this data. It's been created through your marketing activities, through the various activities that your business does. This is extremely valuable data, and as a brand, it's really important that you capture every data point that you can. Of course, at the same time, ensuring that you comply with data privacy regulations. One of the most powerful ways of using first party data, apart from just remarketing to your existing customers or reaching out to them and re-engaging them, is something called lookalike modeling, or like I said earlier, using the capabilities in different advertising platforms to build audiences that are similar to your existing customers. These similar audiences can then be very effective in helping you achieve your business objective. So that's first party data. Let's look at the second type, which is second party data. So what is second party data? It is data that is shared by a partner. Let me explain this with an example. Let's take an airline here, any airline that has a frequent flyer program and wants to promote it. And let's take a bank that wants to promote their travel credit card. Now, the target audience for these two companies would have some degree of overlap. So they could then agree to do some kind of a cross promotion where the airline would tell the bank that they would advertise to existing customers of the travel credit card. And the bank would in turn advertise to existing members of the frequent flyer program. So this type of data sharing is called second party data. When you partner with someone and use their data for your marketing and advertising purposes, it's called second party data. Here you know where the data came from, you know it's from a credible source, and you can trust it. The third type of data is something called third party data. This is basically data collected by a third party, just as the name indicates. Let's look at some examples of this to understand what this really is. Let's say you purchased a database from a vendor. Now you have no clue how the vendor collected that data. You have very little information on the quality of the data. So this is an example of data that's been collected by a third party, and you don't really have a clear idea of how the data was collected. Another example of third party data is your Google Ads audience data. So when you run display ads on the Google Ads platform, you have various audiences that you can target. For example, you can target audiences who are interested in a certain topic, audiences who have an affinity for a certain category, audiences who are in the market for a certain product or service. Now again, in this case, these are audiences that have been built by Google based on the data that Google has collected. Google does give you some idea on how they've collected the data, but you don't have a clear picture of how those audiences are actually built. This is another example of third party data. Only difference here is because Google is an extremely credible player in the online advertising ecosystem, you would trust their data much more than you would trust data from, let's say, something you purchased from a random vendor. Another example of third party data is data collected by something called DMPs or data management platform. So data management platforms are companies that collect data from multiple sources, put it together, process it, segment it, and then package it into specific buckets that can be bought by advertisers. Now, on programmatic advertising platforms, you have access to buy third-party data from data management platforms. You can't do this with Google Ads. In fact, this is something we'll also talk about in a later lesson. The key advantage of programmatic advertising is that you have access to a lot of third-party data. Now, not every third-party data set might be reliable or credible, but it's up to you to ensure you target third-party data sets from more reliable data management platforms. Some of the more reliable data management platforms are Bluekai, which is owned by Oracle, Lotame, Adobe Audience Manager, and the Google Audience Center 360. So when you buy data from DMPs, ensure that the DMP is credible and you can trust that the third-party data would be worth targeting in campaigns that you're running. Using credible third-party audience data can help you reach out to newer audiences through programmatic platforms who you might not be able to really reach otherwise. Great, so we've seen the three different types of data. We've looked at first, second, and third-party data, understood what they are, and looked at examples of each. I hope you're now clear with this concept. If you found this video useful and would like to understand programmatic advertising concepts in more detail, then do check out the programmatic advertising course on Udemy at bit.ly/programmatic-advertising-course. You'll also find the link in the description section of this video. The course starts with a fundamental understanding of what programmatic advertising is. It then takes you through the fundamentals of digital advertising auctions, the components of the programmatic advertising ecosystem, so you'll understand what DSPs, SSPs, ad networks, and ad exchanges are. You'll also learn terminology that's commonly used in the programmatic advertising space. You'll learn about frequency caps, above the fold and below the fold inventory, run-off network and run-off site types of ad buying, programmatic advertising concepts like brand safety, ad fraud, and ad viewability. The course also covers the different types of programmatic advertising. You'll learn about open auctions, private auctions, preferred deals, and programmatic guaranteed deals, and the pros and cons of each type. You will also learn about the Google programmatic ecosystem, the different components and the functions of each component, the difference between programmatic advertising and standard display, and some very interesting programmatic advertising success stories. So do check the course out. Thank you once again for watching this video. Hope you found it useful.